I don't really get riled up about free speech, but I really do get riled up about net neutrality. I just want to be able to surf the web without paying premiums.
Yeah, I had to explain to Lucy what all that meant, and she's like, "Well, why does that make any sense?" And I'm like, "Only to the carriers. That's all it makes sense to." It's like, "You want to go to BrentOzar.com? I'm sorry, that's an extra $5 a month."
Oh, God. Yeah, but if you want to search for, don't even get me started. Yeah, things that they would do to, and it would make everything more expensive because then businesses would have to pay for it. And I can just see
it becomes a shakedown. It's going to be like, "Hey, yo, Subway, you haven't paid AT&T today.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. We're going to have to put you in tier 1. Ain't no one going to get you a site without paying extra. Sorry about that."
It's a nice site you got there. Be a shame if something happened to it. Man, it's bad. It's even bad enough to, just the web hosting costs. So for those of you who, this is going to sound like a total first world problem, but for those of you who read our blog, we're like just hosting WordPress, just the stuff that you go read is now up to $1,500 a month. We're paying like $1,500 a month to host WordPress because of the volume that whenever we get linked to from somewhere, all of a sudden it's boom. So just literally as we went live in here, a post went up on Hacker News where someone said Blitzkrieg SQL Server analysis, and I just went in and looked, and somebody's linking to Blitzcache and SPBlitz and SPBlitz first. So I'm like, oh, it would be awesome if that caught on the front page of Hacker News. That'd be kind of cool.
And yet, PasteToPlan.com is $3 a month.
$3 a month. Yep. It's not just because only our moms use it either. Oh, it's about time we go ahead and get started. You guys are already asking good questions here, so feel free to go ahead and type in whatever questions you've got. We're already up to like half a dozen in here that will probably take us the entire time to answer, but who knows if we go slowly. Oh man, there comes in a seventh, so we're going to be in trouble today. Graham asks, I'm reading Denny Cherry's book, Securing SQL Server, and he says for antivirus configuration, he recommends not scanning the data files because if a data pattern matches that of a known virus, the antivirus could corrupt the database or remove the database file. Has anyone seen this happen?
I've not seen anyone say that that's why to exclude it from the antivirus software. Usually it's, people are saying for performance reasons you don't want it to scan. There's like 60 exclusions that you'll want to add to an antivirus, but I haven't seen the issue that Denny's referring to. But of course I always have exclusions in place.
And they don't usually, antivirus apps don't change the file, they just quarantine the file. They just block it so you can't access it, so that shouldn't cause corruption.
Like it's because, if an MDF and LDF are open in SQL Server, I can't do anything to them. Would an antivirus app be able to grab them and do something?
No, the time where it catches you is on startup. If you stop the instance and start it, and then you can have it where the antivirus has grabbed a lock on one of the files to scan it, and SQL Server skips that database on startup.
Oops.
Cute. Thomas asks, oh, this is such a good question. Do you know of a good working alternative to the T-SQL debugger built into SSMS?
Wait, T-SQL has a debugger?
Yeah,
Ooh,
I don't ever
I should
use
try
it.
that.
I'd never get it to work.
It's the thing that accidentally comes up every time I accidentally hit F6.
Yeah, exactly.
No! Stop.
For those of you who haven't had the pleasure of using the debugger before, you will learn once that it stops the SQL Server while you're stepping through debugging. So if you ever want a way to bring production down quickly, that's a really surefire way to do it, especially if your code has locks in any of the code that you're stepping through. Hello, ugliness. So I know to answer your question, I haven't seen one either.
Yeah, I've never used it. Typically, if I ever feel the need to use a debugger, that means I probably need to break up this script into something smaller.
Stephanie asks, we have a 10-node geocluster. 10-node geocluster. Got to say that slowly. SQL patching takes hours upon hours. I'm not laughing with you. I'm laughing at you. Do you see any issues with pausing the node, then stopping the cluster service locally before starting a SQL Server Service Pack upgrade? Oh, so what was the biggest cluster you guys have ever had in terms of nodes? I'm thinking like 5.
I had, at my last job, we had a 14 node cluster, but this was on SQL Server 2012 where you could have five total replicas, 4 secondaries and 1 primary. So this 14 node cluster had several availability groups spanning different nodes. So, we had a tier 1 and tier 2 servers at the primary site, and then we had tier 3 servers in lower hardware at the DR site. And we needed some of the databases to be, we needed all the databases to be able to be queried on one instance for the business users. So they all had that as a replica too.
How'd you do patching on that?
We did the tier 2 and tier 3 servers. So those are the synchronous and asynchronous replicas. We did those ahead of time. Production wasn't running on them, and then tier 1 we did at night at like 8 o'clock, I think it was. It did not take us hours upon hours though. But again, we split up the work, and I think that we hit all of the primary replicas at the same time.
One big outage. Yeah, it does. Planning takes hours, to get everything staged and ready to go, get everybody's approvals ready to go.
Well, and this was the Microsoft security patching, as far as service packs, same type of thing though.
Oh, Kyle, bless your heart for asking this question. Kyle says, memory optimized tables seem to occupy a ton of memory.
Go on, sir.
Let's think through that for a second. He says, I thought they would be compressed, but I guess I read the specs wrong. Is compression anywhere near the horizon for Hackathon? It would be nice to send Hannah packing. Thanks. Nope. So what Microsoft recommends is that you need 2x the size of the tables. So like if you have 100 gigs worth of Hackathon data, you're supposed to have 200 gigs worth of RAM because Hackathon is append only. All new rows are coming in as new versions, but also deleted rows and updated rows come in as new versions. So that every now and then SQL Server does the equivalent of garbage collection, getting rid of the old versions of rows. It needs a new table in order to go do that. Like a whole lot of other things in SQL Server these days, these features use memory because memory's cheap. I mean, Microsoft has figured out that memory's cheap, and it's time for us to recognize the same thing. Oh my goodness. Let's see. Roland says, I have a database with 1.3 terabytes and lots of indexes on my AGs. Over on my secondary replica, I have a snapshot of the database. When I start the index optimization on the primary replica, my redo queue builds up very high. Last time it was up to 150 gigs in the queue, and it's the only way I was able to drop it was or speed it up was to drop the snapshot. Is there a best practice for how to do huge updates and snapshots along the same time? Have you guys ever used snapshots in combination with an AG? I have not.
Why would you?
No, everybody's shaking their heads. I'm like stretching. If you want to get a point-in-time consistent view of the data, maybe, like if you wanted to say, I want to see my reports as of exactly 8 a.m. this morning. With one thing you might be interested in is 2016 has parallel redo. So if you go to groupby.org, we have a session from Bob Ward on there, and he talks about the differences that parallel redo makes in SQL Server 2016. It says SQL Server 2016, it just runs faster. I don't know of anybody using snapshots with availability groups, though, so that kind of stumps me there. Thomas. Boy, you guys got great questions today. You guys are like the A+ audience. You guys are really, I'm looking forward to this. We might be here for an hour.
D- answers.
Come back next week.
Yeah. Can you just trickle these out? You don't ask all your good questions at once. Save some of them. Did I tell you that audience last week? Man, they were red cards. They were not good. Just kidding, because I know a lot of you were in there. Thomas says, I'm moving a storage array, and I'm shutting down all my SQL servers. Should I stop the SQL Server services first, or just shut down Windows?
I just shut it down. Shut down Windows.
Yeah.
SQL Server takes care of us. It knows what to do when it comes back up, and it has to go through crash recovery.
If you were worried about like if failover of clusters or anything, you could shut down your passive nodes first and then finally shut down the active if you wanted to just walk it all the way down. William says, the debugger, the first time I tried it out, it was on my QA system. I soon afterwards had several confused developers at my cubicle. That's probably true. If you want to take a break from work and get the team to go out for beers or something, you could just fire up the debugger and no one will be able to get any work done. Adam says, I never use cursors in my report queries. Well, Adam, our relationship is off to a good start. But I've been playing around on Stack Overflow, and I see some incredibly convoluted answers to problems. They strike me as they would be much easier solved by a cursor. Granted, these problems are situations where the schema is faulty or part of the solution would be better handled in the presentation layer. He says, are cursors ever a good idea for reporting queries?
I haven't run across an issue with it.
I mean, like you'll find some like way out there crazy edge cases. I think Aaron Bertrand has grouped about has blogged about using cursors in certain scenarios for like grouped medians where they're somehow faster than a set-based solution, but really, for the most part, you're not gonna find that in everyday code.
Next up, Rosemary. Rosemary had emailed us earlier, and I said, hey, you should ask that question during office hours. Rosemary asks, I'm using backup compression, and I got multiple backup files on one dedicated drive. I got like 6 50-gig files, 300 gigs altogether. But this the disk that I'm dealing with only shows 6 gigs free and available. I don't understand why 800 gigs of drive space minus 300 gigs worth of backups means that I only have 5 gigs available. Where'd my other 500 gigs go?
Eric took it.
What's the size of the backup file on disk? I can think of two things here. Trace flag 3042, but that would only apply while the backup is running. So the algorithm that they use in the beginning of the compression process, it may estimate a much larger file size needed than the compressed size, and we had storage. We had free space issues on some mount points at a job that I was at, and so we had to use trace flag 3042 in order to get so that it wouldn't overestimate the size of the needed file. The other thing that I'm thinking of that it might be is the volume shadow copy file, I think. I don't think you can see those if you have Windows Explorer set to show hidden files. I think they're still hidden from the hidden. If I recall correctly, we ended up having to do something to see them in Explorer, and then I forget. I think we had to stop the service to prevent this large file from consuming space.
I love it. And you may not be doing the snapshot. That's someone else doing the snapshot copy. I was going for like a page file. If you have a hidden file that Windows is managing RAM, that will show as like the page file will burn up a ton of space. In Windows Explorer, just set your settings so you can view hidden files, and that should hit that one.
I think in her original email, because I did see the email come through, it said that they have Windows Explorer set up to show hidden files, and the page file should show up in the hidden files. I seem to remember some kind of file that had to do with the shadow copy service. You couldn't see those.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, won't show up
Would
there.
a utility like WinDirstat or something see that?
I don't know. I've never done it with VSS snapshots, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, because whenever I've had like a weird drive space consumption issue, WinDirstat. It's a free-ish or mostly free application I've been able to use to track down weird files that are consuming space. It's always a Stack Overflow MDF, but it's like to see what it is.
Danny says, we have a database full of tables using unique identifiers as primary keys. There are non-clustered indexes on all these unique identifier columns, but there are no clustered indexes anywhere on any of these tables. My knee-jerk reaction is to replace all these non-clustered indexes with clustered indexes ASAP. Is this a no-brainer, or could I be setting myself up for disaster doing this?
We only get one non-clustered index, I mean, one clustered index.
I was like, wait, what?
You don't get multiple clustered indexes. And there's a lot of sort of religious debate around whether you should have a clustered index on a GUID or not. My feeling is generally no, unless you have some like really, one place where GUIDs shine for clustered indexes is if you have like a really high insert workload, you can run into something called last page contention, where you're always trying to burn up and like if you have an identity column or another kind of sequential clustered index key. So you're always trying to insert data to the very end of the index. That's one, that's your hotspot. You can switch over to using a GUID. It's so easy to switch over to using GUID for your cluster index
Just
and
switch
sort
over.
of release that. But generally, you could just add some, surrogate key, so an identity column to the table or something to have a clustered index on instead and keep your non-clustered indexes in place. But that's going to be a heck of an I/O-intensive operation, and I'd probably opt for creating a new table with the with the clustered index that I want on it, insert my data over to it, and then create my non-clustered indexes on it.
And I just make sure you're fixing a problem. Like, no, you can make things worse when you stick on clustered indexes. It's not normal, but just make sure that you understand that you're fixing a problem. Like, look at what's the top weight stat on that server before you go plan things.
Like another thing you might want to do is if you run SP Blitz Index in mode 4 for that database, you'll get a lot of information about your heaps back. So you'll see if there's heaps with a lot of forwarded records in them, or heaps that are occupying a lot of space. So like if you have a workload that deletes from heap tables, the pages may not get released from the heap back to the database. So you may just have a bunch of empty pages which SQL is still going to unfortunately scan and look at when you read from the table. So I would run Blitz Index in mode 4 for that database to get some more information about the heaps to see if they are actually problematic.
Problematic. Like automatic, but different. Fred says, I have a database with a 30 gig log file, but the data file is 25 gigs. I've avoided clearing or shrinking the log. What do you think is going on, and what should I do?
Do you really need the disk space? It's so close in size, I'd probably just keep it that way. Are you running, is your recovery model in bulk logged or full? Mm-hmm. If so, make sure you have transact log backups occurring and that they're occurring frequent enough for your workload.
Full backups are not going to clear that out.
Right.
This is a 1 terabyte solid state drive. It's smaller than a phone, costs $300 at Amazon. So just, be careful what you're doing there with the 30 gig log file. Oh my God, it's the end of the world. Not necessarily. Raul says, can someone confirm that an index rebuild requires taking the database offline in standard edition?
No. Yeah, we'll confirm that is not required.
It will take
something. Your index is going to come offline for standard edition, so it won't be able to be used to tell the performance of queries. But the database, the database remains online. You'll just have some blocking for the index that's currently being rebuilt.
Roland says, I've read you should do a rebuild on all your indexes after you upgrade SQL Server. Why is this recommended? Wherever you read that, go hunt them down and bookmark that site because you never want to go back there again. You want to be able to recognize bad advice when you come to it. You did exactly the right thing by asking why is it true, because there's so much bad stuff out there on the internet, many of which comes from our own site, but in this case, not this time. This is a different case. No,
did you guys ever do update statistics after an upgrade?
Yes.
I didn't always, just depend on the system, whether I wanted to spend the time doing it or not. How critical was the server or database?
Yeah, and what kind of stinks is like a lot of the times when you read people saying that you should update statistics after you move, they're like, oh, you have to do it with a full scan. But like when you have a multi-terabyte database, you can't just like willy-nilly, I'm going to full scan all these statistics, no problem.
Let's see. Eric asks. Eric's got a big long one. Yeah, the other Eric.
Hey, thanks.
Only one other Eric. Holy cow, Eric. That's actually a good question. Example of a question to post over on Stack Exchange. As you see these answer the questions or slides scroll by, if you're on YouTube or on the live broadcast, there's instructions on how to go to dba.stackexchange. Anytime you find yourself typing multiple sentences and especially multiple lines, multiple questions, probably want to go tackle that over at Stack Exchange.
Mm-hmm. Or it sounds like there's a vendor product involved, so you might want to check with the vendor on that as well.
Paul says, do you have any suggestions for job management applications? We want to manage all our agent jobs from a central server, but all the apps I found don't really do logical mapping, meaning if the job fails on this stored procedure, start at this particular step again.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's going to cost you money. So SQL Sentry Performance Advisor does have a whole job chaining and job thinging thing in their product. I haven't used it extensively because I never had a need for it. I was always pretty cool with different servers having sort of different profiles for that stuff. But it's pretty cool. If you go check out SQL Sentry again, Sentry One Performance Advisor. If you go to the Sentry One website, they have like the job managing part of the Performance Advisor product that there's all sorts of pretty screen caps and an explanation of in there if you want to look at it. Other than that, I don't know.
I'm trying to think of the tool that we used at my last job because we weren't just managing SQL Server. The DevOps team wasn't managing just SQL Server, so we had another some kind of Windows third-party package that we purchased. It wasn't cheap, and I know other people have used it. It came up in the MVP mailing list recently, and I think it was Adam Mechanic that mentioned that they use it as well. So we had to kick off different things and then kick off SQL Server jobs, and so it managed a lot low. I just can't remember the name of it. It's an expensive product too.
There's Jams has one. Jams, Unicenter is another one. Yeah.
I mean, I had a client once building, they built their own.
Yeah, I mean, why not just build your own? How hard could it be, right?
How hard can it be?
Yeah, it just needs a web front end and some stuff behind it that does things. Use the cloud.
Error handling will leave for version 2.
We don't need that. That's optional.
JH has an interesting one. He says someone asked him to create a database, and he says, according to our documentation, the databases should have the following settings. Character encoding of UTF-8 or UTF-16, and the collation sequence is case insensitive. You should just have them give you the exact collation that they want, because this still leaves all kinds of things up in the air. Just say exactly which collation do you want, and if you look in books online, there's a list of collations. It's stunning. That should keep them busy for a while.
I've got the answer to the tool I was using. It's called Tidal, Tidal.
Is that a streaming music service by Jay-Z?
It might be a Cisco product. I didn't look it up. Just the name.
Can you set UTF settings on a database?
What's that?
Can you set UTF settings like that on a database, 8 and 16? I've never seen that part before. The only thing I've ever read is that the bulk BCP had some problem with like UTF-8 or 16 stuff that got solved recently, but I've never seen that setting for a database.
No clue. Sam says, for new SQL servers, what do you typically set your auto-growth settings to out of interest? Or do you consider VLFs in your decision?
I absolutely consider VLFs in my decision just because I've ran into excessive downtime as a result of having high VLFs.
Tell me, go on about that. Well, what's that like? Excessive downtime, that's awesome. I know what
this company did applied the Microsoft security patches monthly, and so we were doing this with just about 5 SQL servers on this one night, and the most critical database of those servers, it was down. We had reviewed the server, and SQL Server was up, but the database was in crash recovery, and I kept looking at I think it was the error log, and seeing where it was at. It was frustrating because this application had really high availability SLAs, and we were in a window still, but maintenance window, but still we were not allowed to have that kind of downtime. So it came up after about 45 minutes. I was almost in the process of opening up a case with Microsoft to figure out what was going on. And so the next Monday, I contacted Microsoft via email, and that's when I learned about VLF. This was about a little over 10 years ago, I'd say, but 45 minutes, and this was like a 7 terabyte database, and the transaction log wasn't even that big for that system. It probably was like, I don't know, 200, 300 gigabytes. But I monitor VLFs ever since that outage because it was such a big deal for this application being down that long. As far as what I set for auto-growth, it just depends on, if I'm doing a new database and I know that this database is going to be small, medium, or large, then I'll set the increments to adjust that. If I think that this database is going to be pretty sizable, I'll usually use, 1 to 5 gigabytes for the transaction log file. But that depends upon how fast your storage is and how quickly it can grow it out, since you can't use instant file initialization for the log files. Data files, I'll set even higher since we do use IFI on those.
I think the most important thing, though, is just to get away from percent auto-grow.
Yeah. Because
as your database grows, that's going to be a larger and larger chunk of file to grow out. So, as long as you set it to a fixed increment, I think you're just always going to be in much better shape than percent auto-grow.
1 meg.
10% or 1 megabyte. I don't know which one is worse.
Yes.
Graham asks a question we happened to be talking about the other day in the company chat room. We have a 600 gig database that's being backed up with a third-party app, and I'm not going to name which one it is because I don't want these poor people to feel bad. Our backups have been failing because the VSS writer has been freezing I/O for 60-plus seconds, and the vendor support has not been helpful. What's the best approach to address this? I'll say treat your servers like cattle, not like pets. When I'm dealing with a VM, I'm not even going to do VM level backups. I'm going to back up my SQL servers. I'm going to do regular SQL Server full and log backups, and use a different technique like log shipping, database mirroring, anything like that to be ready to go to fail over to. But I'm the kind of person who never wants to restore the OS. I mean, I never.
Yeah.
Something goes so horribly awry that I can't trust the OS and I have to step back in time. I don't trust that OS, period. Who knows if last night's snapshot is going to be any good or not. So I don't like doing snaps on SQL Server VMs.
Yeah, the only time I've ever done anything close to that was when I had to P2V some machines, and even then I was nervous as hell about. I was like, is this going to...
Yeah, Graham is saying this is for this vendor SQL Server backup agent. Yeah, I'm saying I don't use those. I'm not a big fan of those. Kyle says, after letting stats maintenance lapse, well, we all have our downfalls, I noticed that sysindex's ROMOD counter, our poor transcriptionist, don't worry, our transcriptionist, I will correct that, of some stats is recording far more changes than the number of rows in the table. Like, say the table has 100,000 rows and it shows 300,000 changes. Does that mean that nothing is querying the table because SQL Server hasn't automatically updated the stats? Oh, what a cute question.
It could also you haven't hit a threshold where, well, actually, never mind on that.
Yeah.
I mean, he doesn't specify the values, and the threshold from 2014 and older is 20%. So maybe you haven't hit the 20% threshold. On 2016, it's lower than 20%, and Erik has a blog article on it. It's not, you can't really tell you a fixed number for 2016. They changed how the thresholds.
Well, there's a trick. He says that the ROMOD counter is higher than the number of rows in the table, which means it should have tripped the 20%. I can think of two things that would cause this. One is that the stats are only updated whenever you do a select, which could be that you're right, that it hasn't tripped the 20% threshold. The other thing is if these numbers are tiny. The metric was technically, last time I looked, 20% plus 500 rows. So if we were talking about a 100-row table, then that would also come into play there. But otherwise, I like that nothing's queried the table.
Yeah, that would be my first instinct.
Paul Olson says, how do I reclaim the data file space used by a heap table? Did you delete it?
You're not. So if you mean you deleted data from there, and it's just you have a big empty heap, your options suck. You could create a clustered index on the table, right, which will fix things up. You can rebuild the table in, I think it's 2008 plus, but you have to be real careful with that because when you rebuild a heap, you rebuild all the non-clustered indexes on it as well. And that can be a really bad word situation.
And you can truncate the table too, but of course then you lose all the data in it. That deallocates all the space immediately, but if you have any rows, you're screwed. Steven says, if you wanted to capture DML events on user tables, how would you go about it? So there's probably two parts to this for readers who don't understand what a DML event is, and then also how would you go about capturing them?
I wouldn't do it. I mean, the systems that I've supported have too much data coming in, being changed to ever audit like that. You could put it, use triggers. It doesn't CDC help you with that too? I'm not positive on that though. But yeah. Triggers is how I've seen a lot of people do it. But I can't afford the performance hit of that kind of micromanagement.
But triggers on DML?
Every insert, update, delete.
You send it to a logging table.
I've
implemented it as
an after trigger
requirement.
Yeah, just log it in the app. Be done with it.
Yeah.
Don't worry about ad hoc stuff.
But then you're missing DBAs coming through and modifying the data or whatever.
Yeah.
My first instinct is to go with an after trigger if it has to be done on the database.
Yeah, definitely.
Roland says, in a simple join of two tables, what in the holy... I'm going to say this out loud.
It's so simple.
Saying, in a simple join of two tables, the second table supplies always the same number of rows as the predicate is always the same as the same PK.
Gosh, no.
Who put the bomb on the bomb?
I need to see data at this point and expected output.
Stack Exchange would be a great place for this question.
The only thing I'm going to say is we're going to nibble out one part of this. He says, switching from 2008 R2 to 2014, the logical reads changed. How should I approach this problem? What changed from SQL Server? What changed in SQL Server 2014 to change execution plans? I'll rewind.
Functionality estimator.
What is that, and what does it do?
I'll let you guys take that one. I don't know the answer.
Well, it's like one of those guys in Vegas who can count cards, basically. So the cardinality estimator figures out how many tries to figure out how many rows are going to be returned by an operation based on statistics and histograms and cardinality and joins and all sorts of other fun things like that. So in 2014, the cardinality estimator was completely redone for the first time since SQL Server 2000 or 7 or some old ancient version. And a lot of stuff changed. There's a great white paper by Mr. Joe Sack about the cardinality estimator. I will grab a link for that as soon as I'm done talking, unless one of my lovely co-hosts would like to do that now. But that's where I would go and start reading about it, because that's, I think, where you're going to find the key to this. I would look at the execution plan as well to see if something changed. It sounds like perhaps something got replaced with a nested loops join. Since he's talking about one rows being read over and over again, that would be my first instinct. But I would check out the execution plans and go read Joe Sack's white paper about the cardinality estimator.
And if you want to test that it's the cardinality estimator on your database, change the compatibility level. Change it back to, say, 2012 or 2008 R2. That'll flip you back into the old cardinality estimator, and you may get immediately a different execution plan.
There's trace flags on the blog too. Oh man, you get people need too many links.
If the thing's already in production, you shouldn't be flipping the compat level back and forth. The reason why is it's going to clear your plan cache. So Erik's trace flag idea is much better when you're troubleshooting one query at a time.
Yeah, let me grab that for him.
All right, we'll put that in the Q&A if he's got pulling that up. And that sums up our webcast for this week. Thanks everybody for hanging out with us. I hope you had an excellent time, and we will see you in the next office hours. Adios.
Hang on.